Before we start the class, I thought it'd be nice to just do a very short meditation, 15 minutes, just to relax the body, relax the mind, and set a good motivation. So let's start with that. As an act of loving kindness for yourself, allow your awareness to descend into the body, simply becoming aware of sensations throughout the body. Using the out-breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. Softening and relaxing all the muscles in the face. Mouth and jaw soft and relaxed. And all the muscles around the eyes soft and relaxed. Allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Relaxing more deeply with each out-breath. allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. Setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Not dwelling in the past, not anticipating the future. Simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. Simply focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. Wherever you can most easily notice any sensations associated with the breathing. If you become distracted from the breath, be happy that you've noticed that you're distracted. And then simply relax, release the distraction, and very gently return to focusing on the breath. simply becoming dull or spaced out, then use the in-breath as an opportunity to arouse and refresh, to sharpen your focus on the breath. And then let's just spend a few minutes reflecting on our motivation for coming here to this retreat. How do you want to benefit from our time together over these days? Try to expand your motivation out to include others. To not only wish to receive benefit yourself, but to be able to use this to be able to benefit those around us. How would you like to benefit the people around you? How would you like to help? Try to set the best possible motivation for attending this retreat. keeping this motivation in mind, we can slowly end this meditation and begin our discussions together this morning. We all want to be happy, and we all want to be free of suffering. I think that's something we all share in common. And often it seems to us as if the source of our happiness and the source of our suffering is out there, somewhere in the world. And so one of the main methods we tend to use to try to be happy, to try to overcome our suffering, is we try to manipulate the things around us. We try to attract people, places and things that seem to be the source of our happiness. And we also try to push away or avoid people, places and things that seem to be the source of our suffering. But is this an effective method? Are we getting any closer to finding genuine happiness and overcoming our suffering if we use this method? No matter how hard we try to do this, of course, we still seem to encounter suffering, and we're still chasing after that elusive happiness. All we are really doing if we use this approach is that we're trapping ourselves in the hope-fear cycle. Hoping for pleasant experiences, fearing or worrying about unpleasant experiences. And of course, if we don't get the things we want, we often become very frustrated. And even if we do get the things we want, they never really seem to fully satisfy us, and we simply end up craving for more. And then at some point, when nothing really seems to satisfy us, we often end up with a lot of disappointment and dissatisfaction when things don't seem to live up to their expectations. This approach to trying to find happiness and overcome suffering is sort of explained in Buddhism using a presentation called the 8 Worldly Concerns. Which are actually 4 pairs. One thing we're trying to get, and the other thing we're trying to avoid or push away. The first pair is gain and loss. Gain here means material gain, means money, wealth, possessions. So we often feel as if money is a source of happiness. The more money, the more stuff, the more material possessions we have, the more happy we're going to be. So we put a lot of effort in increasing our material wealth. We put a lot of effort in getting more stuff in the hope that it's going to make us more happy. And then, of course, we often feel as if we don't have money, we lack things, that's going to be a source of suffering. So we do a lot of whatever we can to avoid loss, meaning losing possessions, losing money. So this is the first pair. The second pair is pleasure and pain. And we often tend to equate pleasure with happiness, meaning if we want to be happy, we just need more pleasure. So we put a lot of effort in trying to engage or get more pleasurable experiences. So we go to a lot of lengths to have nicer meals, better holidays, better looking stuff, more sensory pleasure. And then of course we equate painful, unpleasant experiences with suffering. So we try to do as much as we can to avoid those situations. But also we tend to feel as if our happiness is dependent on what people are saying about us. And so the third pair is praise and blame. So we often feel as if it's important that people are saying good things about us for us to be happy. So we go to a lot of extent to receive praise from others. And of course, we tend to feel as if when people are blaming us for things, particularly things we never did, that this is really a source of a lot of suffering. So we try to avoid situations where people blame us for things. But not only do we feel it important for our happiness what people are saying about us, but we also equally feel important for our happiness what people are thinking about us. So the fourth pair is good reputation and bad reputation. So we go to a lot of lengths to ensure that we have a good reputation, that people are thinking good about us, that they're acknowledging us and respecting us. And of course we feel as if we have a bad reputation, that's going to be a source of a lot of suffering. So we go to a lot of lengths to avoid getting a bad reputation. So basically we feel as if these things on the left here are the source of our happiness, and the things on the right are the source of our suffering. So we try to get as much as we can of the things on the left, and we try to avoid the things on the right. But are the things on the left really the source of our happiness? And are the things on the right really the source of our suffering? If they were, it would imply, particularly from the first one, that the most wealthy people in the world would be the most happy people, and the poorest people would definitely have the most suffering. But actually in all my travels, I often find it to be the reverse. I often find the people who have a lot of money and wealth tend to be quite miserable, and often places where people don't really have much, I often see they seem to be more content and more happy. Now, within Buddhism here, what we're saying is, of course, that these things are not the source of happiness and these are not the source of our suffering. That in fact we're really looking in the wrong place. That the source of happiness and suffering is not out there in the world. So what we find, and also this is something that is sort of acknowledged or understood a little bit also, I think, within psychology. Because chasing after the things on the left often nowadays is called a very materialistic outlook on life. You know, more stuff, more pleasure and so forth. But is a materialistic outlook on life helpful or not? And here I've got a quote from a psychologist who says the following: existing scientific research on the value of materialism yields clear and consistent findings. People who are highly focused on materialistic values have lower personal well-being and psychological health than those who believe that materialistic pursuits are relatively unimportant. So it also seems like in psychology it's understood that chasing after those things on the left is not going to make you happy. In fact, you end up with a lower level of mental and psychological well-being. So, from a Buddhist perspective, we're simply looking in the wrong place for the source of happiness and suffering. And so often in Buddhism, we hear about we have to give up these 8 worldly concerns. And there often, the word that you'll hear is this word renunciation. And this is a classic example of how terminology creates confusion. Because actually, this is a very poor translation of the original Sanskrit word. Because here, renunciation in Buddhism, or what's translated as renunciation, is the entry point into the Buddhist spiritual path. If we want to enter the Buddhist spiritual path, we have to cultivate renunciation. And that's often then presented in terms of the 8 worldly concerns. And so renunciation, of course, is coming from renounce, to give up. So it's often presented as we need to give up the 8 worldly concerns. And then people look at that and go, ooh, I don't think I want to be a Buddhist. Because then I have to give up all my money, my BMW, eating nice meals at a restaurant, being praised and having a good reputation. Actually, to be a Buddhist, I need to give up those. They're wrong, they're bad. Complete misunderstanding. On 2 counts. When we talk about giving up the 8 worldly concerns, again, we're talking about giving up the 8 worldly concerns. We're not talking about giving up the 8 worldly things. So whether or not you have money, pleasure, praise, or good reputation is not the issue. The issue is how we relate to these things. If we believe these things are the source of our happiness, and we have a lot of craving and attachment to that, that's going to create a lot of suffering. So when we talk about giving up the 8 worldly concerns, what we're really talking about is giving up attachment or craving to these things. Meaning, give up an unhealthy attitude to these things. Give up attachment to the ones on the left, and give up aversion to the things on the right. Because attachment to the things on the left and aversion to the things on the right is just going to create more suffering. So this is what we are to give up in terms of the 8 worldly concerns. And here the word concern doesn't mean, oh, forget about having any sort of money or pleasure. Of course, we need certain amount of money and material wealth to have a roof over our head and shirt and eat, to be able to eat. Concern here is basically talking about believing that these are going to make us happy. So it's really talking about the craving and attachment to these things. We're not talking about being apathetic to these things. We're just talking about having a healthy attitude towards them. And then this word renunciation here, it's coming from the original Sanskrit word here is nisarana. And nisarana literally means to emerge from, to get out of. So nisarana is talking about emerging from suffering and towards the goal of liberation from suffering. So basically this is an aspiration for liberation from suffering, understanding that the source of suffering is in here, not out there. So this word renunciation is not a very good translation of that term. Unfortunately, this term was coined quite some years ago and it sort of stuck. So now it's widely used. But again, whenever we see the word renunciation, particularly it's presented as the entry point into the Buddhist spiritual path, we're not talking about giving up all of our stuff, shaving our head, going off and living in a cave for the rest of our life. That's nothing to do with renunciation. Renunciation here, in terms of giving up, is talking about giving up the idea that these are the source of our happiness and turning our attention inwards and looking for the source of happiness and suffering within ourselves, and then having that aspiration to be liberated from suffering. So this is what renunciation really means, the original term. Any questions about the 8 worldly concerns? Yeah.
I had a thought about blame.
Blame, yeah.
I thought that maybe blame is something external, while something like guilt, when I feel guilty that I've done something bad or mistreated someone, that's not something, I think it's different somehow. I'm not sure. I think I should give up this one, not that one.
Yeah. We're going to be looking at guilt a little bit later, because again, unfortunately, guilt is something that seems to be epidemic in our modern society. Mm-hmm. And the short answer to your question, I'll give the long answer later, is we don't need to feel guilty about anything. Guilt is completely useless, and unfortunately it's been used over the centuries as a way of having power over people. It's completely useless. There's something sort of related to it that is useful, and I'll talk about that later. But that's the short answer. Any other questions? Yeah.
How can we draw the line between wanting and concern about money and feeling that this is enough? Or
yeah. The point is really the main thing is, where's the focus? Are we focused outwardly or inwardly? And I think you'll find that if we're focused inwardly, the outward things seem to take care of themselves. It becomes, we'll do enough to have enough money to be comfortable. It'll just be, because then if we're not focusing outward, we're not going to have craving and attachment to it, or at least a lot less than we do now. And the line between knowing whether we have craving and attachment for something or not is, do we get upset if we don't get it? If we get upset if we don't get it, then there's certainly craving and attachment there. So that's the bottom line. Of course, we need a certain amount of money in that. And if we don't get it, we go, okay, let's try something different. But if we really get upset, that's a sure sign there's craving there.
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's craving and it's attachment.
Sure,
to me.
sure.
I'm sure.
Sure.
So the thing is, just to notice it, it doesn't go away.
No, because as long as we believe deep down that this is going to bring us happiness, we're always going to have that, because that's creating the craving and attachment.
It's not just the belief that it's going to make me happy, but it's kind of fear maybe. It's something that I lose something. It's fear.
Exactly.
Or it's a rationalization.
Fear is the flip side of attachment. Attachment is wanting it. Fear is not thinking I'm not going to get it. So again, as long as we have the idea that those things are going to make me happy, we're trapped. We're trapped in the hope-fear cycle. We're trapped. And see, the thing is, intellectually we may think, oh yeah, I understand those things are not going to make me happy. Yet, we're still going to be craving, we're still going to fear and worry. Why? Because it's just some vague intellectual understanding. Because our behavior is not driven by our intellectual understanding. Our behavior is driven by our instinctive habit. and my instinctive habit is telling me that's going to make me happy. Even though intellectually, if we think about it, we go, actually, that's not going to make me happy. I sort of know that. Yet, still, there's craving and attachment and fear, we're not going to get it. Because we haven't shifted, we haven't changed our habits. So as I mentioned last night, in terms of the three wisdoms, the hearing and contemplation, you may reflect on this and intellectually go, yeah, I understand actually these are not really the source of my happiness. I know that. Okay. Still, we're having craving for these things and fear that we're not going to get them. Because our intellectual understanding is not enough. That's why we need the third wisdom, meditation. If we internalize that understanding, intellectual understanding, if we really meditate on it and really come to experientially see things that this is not the source of happiness, then our instinctive habit's going to shift slowly. Then instinctively we'll instinctively know that's not going to make me happy. Then it's going to be much harder to have craving, attachment, fear, worry, anxiety. It's impossible. It becomes impossible for them to come up. So this is the key here. In Buddhism, it's not enough just to be smart. We can be the smartest, most intelligent person in the world and have huge suffering. Because intelligence is not enough to shift our habits. We need to bring it inside, and that's why meditation is crucial. Because if we don't do that, we can maybe even torture ourselves more. Because we know, or we think we know we've got the answer, yet I'm still miserable. No? So now we've got an expectation. Now on top of the normal, we have an expectation that we should be happy because we think we know the answer, yet we're even more miserable. So the answer, of course, is we need to bring it inside. We need to meditate and come to experience this. Then there'll be a big shift in our life.
20 years, 30 years of sitting.
We still want quick fix.
Again, that question, how long does it take, is we have craving and attachment for the result. We're still craving some result. And that's going to block us. So all we need to do is understand that this is the right way, and in the present moment, put the most effort we can. And whatever effort will benefit. But if we always go, oh, I want it now, I've got to have it now, now, we're not going anywhere. Because it's just another type of... All we've done is we've substituted craving and attachment of this for craving and attachment for genuine happiness or some sort of goal. We're still stuck.
I wanted to ask about number 3 and 4.
Yeah.
As I understand it, it's like what people, how can I benefit from other people? What they think about me, what they say about me. But what about how I can benefit them and wanting people to be around me for making me feel that I love them, that I care for them, and this is external things. And if I will be, and I believe that the happiness is there, with this external human beings, that I can relate to, not only for my benefit, but also for their benefit, also for the communication. I mean, for love, you know, love is like the greatest feeling. I think. This is out there. I mean, it's about other people. It's about if these people are gone, and I will be alone, I will be sad.
So again, this is a sure sign of attachment. It's a sure sign that we are needing those people to be happy.
But you need people to give someone. I mean,
See, the thing is, what this is still, we're jumping ahead now, but it's going to come. I think this afternoon or tomorrow, this afternoon already, is what we're really talking about here. maybe I'll bring it in now. Is we can talk about two types of happiness. There's what's called temporal happiness, which is another name for pleasure. It means the happiness we get from some pleasant stimulus. And then genuine happiness. Temporal happiness is happiness we receive from some pleasant experience, some pleasant stimulus. This, of course, is a stimulus-based happiness. So, of course, if we do something for someone else and we get a pleasant stimulus because of that, then that is the experience we have. So for this, of course, we need things and people to have this. We need stimulus. Without stimulus, we're not going to get this. But what we're really talking about here, in terms of happiness, is we're talking about this. And this is not stimulus-based.
What is, excuse me, what is stimulus?
So what we're really talking about here, from within Buddhism, striving for happiness, we're striving for this. This is a state of inner well-being that does not require any stimulus to be present. So if there's no people, or there's pleasant people, unpleasant people, doesn't matter. We can maintain this state of inner well-being all the time. This is what we are striving for.
You don't have the possibility to give.
With this, we have the best possibility to give. Because see, the thing is, are we saying there's anything wrong with this? Is Buddhism saying this is wrong? No. What Buddhism's saying is that if we hope that this is going to fulfill us, then we have problem. If we hope that this is going to be what's going to fulfill our life,